So we figured that up to 90% of those builds on CI that are running this Xcode build, running the Gradle wrapper for 30 minutes per pipeline, are unnecessary. React Native Enterprise Framework is a modular system. You can extend its capabilities with plugins, with platforms. You can replace bundlers.
So we added this to just this one pipeline that does the smoke test suite. We were able to shave off that build time for cached builds from 35 minutes to around 3-4 minutes.
For me as a developer, that's sort of a life changer in the situations where you want to check out a branch somebody else is working on and you want to do a real quick review. You don't have to wait for your build. You don't have to set up everything locally. You download this thing from cache.
Yeah, exactly. And the best thing is that you don't even need to build locally and you don't need to install the native dependency tooling.
React Universe on Air, your go-to podcast for all things cross-platform.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ola. I'll be your host for today. I'm a React Native developer at Callstack, and I'm joined by Łukasz and Michał. Do you want to do some introductions, starting with Łukasz?
Hey everyone, I'm Łukasz. I also host this podcast sometimes, but here today I'm in the dual role. I'm gonna ask Michał some questions as well, but also I have first-hand experience with React Native Enterprise Framework for one of our clients. So I'm gonna talk about that.
All right, and hi, I'm Michał, principal engineer at Callstack. I'm responsible for our open source projects, efforts, parts of our R&D, and as a part of that, recently I'm focusing on a new project called React Native Enterprise Framework, which is the most boring name for a project, but we couldn't figure out a better one yet. If you want to help us out, figure out a better naming, my DMs are open anywhere.
We'll talk about the name in a second. Yes, Łukasz?
I disagree. This is a great name, React Native Enterprise Framework. It's really descriptive.
It's to the point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it says what it says, and it's just boring, right? But maybe it's the right name.
Yeah, maybe it's good. Maybe we're done with all the fancy names.
Yeah, naming is hard.
It is, right?
It is. And caching, and we're doing both with this project, so.
Nice. Okay, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about React Native Enterprise Framework. So in Polish, we say RNF, like when we talk with each other, but in English, I guess somebody would try to RNEF. That's
RNEF, yeah.
Yeah, that's how people will pronounce it. So as Łukasz already said, he's in the dual role here. He'll start out as a guest, but he told me that he has lots of questions, so he'll be also asking questions. But let's start with me asking you questions. So we're gonna kick off this podcast with a practical example. So we're kicking it off with the example of the project that Łukasz is working on. We can't say the name of the real project, so we're just gonna call it Project A. And let's imagine it's a React Native application that sells computers and computer parts. So it has some specific limitations and specific features that it has to have. And it's a big application. It has a robust repo, robust, a lot of files, lots of files. So Łukasz, can you tell us a little bit about the pain points that you have as a team leader, as a developer in such a big repo for?
Sure. So like you said, we have a big project and it sells computer parts apparently. And we have a lot of targets in that project, and we have a lot of different variants of that project, a lot of variants of the outcome application.
Can you give us some examples? What variants do you have? Do you have I don't know, TVs, cars? Or...
No. So we have only iOS and Android, but we have our generic app, and then we have branded apps. So we have several different versions of the same app. And they differ in size, not only by team, but also by some functionality.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the generic version that is that has basically everything, and it's not branded. Okay. So in this kind of project, we have struggled with testing. So we have a bunch of automation tests written for it, but in order to run all of them, it would be it wouldn't be a good idea to run all of them on each PR. And we wanted to bring some confidence to the project so that on each PR, we can run some maybe smaller tests of smoke suit test of testing. Yeah.
Yeah, but ideally, if you have a lot of tests, it would be ideal to be able to run all the tests and be confident in the PR that you're not breaking anything.
Well, that depends, right? So that's like the comparison, the compromise between like the confidence and the time it takes to test. So we don't want to block everyone on each small PR for hours to have all of the tests run. So we figured out that we have those let's say 10 tests that we want to run on each PR, and we want to run them only on that generic build, let's say.
Okay.
So this still blocked us for 1 hour before the outcome of the testing reached the pipeline again.
So even if you had approves on your PR and everything, you still had to wait for an hour before.
Oh yeah, because you want to have the confidence that your app is not breaking critical user paths.
Okay.
So you wanted to wait for the outcome of the testing. So we looked at it, and around half of that time, so 35 minutes for iOS and a little bit less for Android, was spent on native building of the application.
That's a lot of time for the build.
That's the question to Michał. Is this a lot of time, or this is standard for native building?
Yeah, so for a medium to big size project, I would say it's a typical time that is spent on some medium to large workers on CI.
So it's a typical problem, but from the point of view of the developer, it's a lot of time that they have to wait every time they want to merge some PR.
Yeah, and I knew that Michał is cooking something under the curtain for some time now.
Cooking under the curtain, that's not very smart. You could make the curtain burn or something. Don't do that.
Okay, so cooking under the behind the curtain.
Let's put it behind. Yeah.
And that he's working on something very secretive, but I knew what it was. I pitched it to the client that maybe we can integrate this freshly baked project into our...
So let me interject real quick. I want to give context to our listeners how it happens that Michał is cooking something and then you kind of know, but it's secret. At Callstack, we have an R&D department and Michał is in charge of that. So there are some developers who work on R&D full-time on open source stuff, and just Michał knows everything about it. And it's you communicate inside the company, some of it, right?
Oh yeah, some secrets are very secretive and no one knows about them. But I guess this one wasn't as secretive as some other ones. So a bunch of people knew what Michał was doing, and not only Michał, a few other folks as well. So I approached our client pitching this idea. This is in order to unblock this effort for smoke test suite, we need to cut down the build times. We need to shave off some time from there. And we could integrate this React Native Enterprise Framework. It was back in January when we started thinking about this. And I said, probably it's going to be around 2 months before it's open sourced. But what's nice about me starting doing that with some other developers on the project, and Michał doing the actual work on the framework itself, is that we could collaborate then. So I took what React Native Enterprise project was at that time. I tried to integrate it. I hit some roadblocks. I hit some issues. I talked with Michał every day. And then we would solve problems either in my understanding of my project and implementation, or in React Native Enterprise Framework itself.
Do you have some examples of something that stuck out to you that was an interesting issue that the both of you hashed out?
Do you remember how we found out that our project was on that one particular React Native version that used some strange name for an iOS variable or something? Do you remember that?
I think I would need some more pointers.
But I believe you, Łukasz. I believe you that happened.
What we basically did is we updated our project. Like either we downgraded just one version or upgraded our project, because it was only this one patch version of React Native that had this issue.
Yeah, unless you're talking about the like messed up scripts in the Xcode environment and Xcode React Native or React Native Xcode shell script.
Yeah, something like that.
And yeah, so there was a change in the core that basically changed the way that the bundle command is executed and how it has the options from the command line passed to it, and it didn't take into account some, let's say, exotic setups in the community CLI, and also in Expo, and also in Repack. So what we did, and what Expo did, and what Repack did, is we added some extra, not very obtrusive, but still not very nice code into that script, and that was the workaround. So it's a nice thing about React Native that we can adjust those things.
Definitely.
Although we should definitely upstream those changes in the core of the React Native.
Yeah, I was going to ask if those changes stayed for like the next versions as well.
Yeah. So they are there still, and we just haven't prioritized upstreaming that for the rest of the user, because it's like we actually looked at what Expo did. They patched that to unblock themselves, and figured, okay, let's do that for now. Sooner or later, we're gonna just propagate this change, which will likely require some more work, because it's likely affecting some internal testing and maybe some scripts that Meta is writing internally to verify some things in React Native, whether they're breaking or not.
Okay, so everyone who's listening, if you have some troubles with your exotic build setup on iOS, there's a chance that you'll probably need to look for the same fix that Michał found. I think we can move on. So your collaboration was successful. Like you knew that the secret project was going on. You reached out to your client. You started integrating it. You ironed out some details, and then you did integrate into your computer parts selling app.
Yes.
You integrated RNEF.
Yeah.
And then what happened? Tell us the success story.
Yeah. So that's a POC, right? So we added this to just this one pipeline that does the smoke test suite. We were able to shave off that build time for cached builds from 35 minutes to around 3-4 minutes, because you still need some like glue actions.
Yeah,
around
but I mean,
that
from 30 minutes to 3, that's amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And also, what's important is you still need to bundle your JS and to re-sign the bundle, basically. So that takes around 3-4 minutes for both platforms. So yeah, like we shave off like half of the time of that pipeline, which was wasted on building. So right now, this POC was successful. This pipeline is running. Now, what we want to do is extend this to production pipelines as well, because definitely we have a lot of savings to do there, and our pipelines are basically ready for that. And to enable developers to use this locally, because like I played around with it, it works locally, but for now, without this POC, it wasn't really a time to start discussion with the clients if we want to change everyone's dev environment to use this like new experimental, not published yet library. So I think that's the time now to open up that discussion.
And I think you mentioned something. What slipped in there is that you use it on one pipeline, which is possible because incremental adoption is possible with RNEF. I think it's an important feature, and maybe if we want to talk about RNEF, I would love to start with incremental adoption because there's a lot of thought that went into that. Could you Could you tell us more about that, Michał?
I can start with the incremental adoption mindset. So first, maybe let's go back into what the whole React Native Enterprise framework actually is. So essentially, from a developer point of view, it's a set of tools that you can use in your React Native project to build mobile or TV or desktop applications.
Okay, so let's get the name also out there, because like the first time I heard enterprise framework, I thought that it's paid because it's enterprise, but that's not the goal of the name. You said it's the tooling for React Native developers, but it's called enterprise because it's for bigger apps, right?
Yes, exactly. It's an open source project at this point. Is completely free. It runs on your machines, either locally or in some CI environment that you have. And it's always going to be this way. We're not focusing on providing you servers or any kind of compute. And this is because of this enterprise part of this framework. So at Callstack, we're working with a variety of different clients. Like they're building mobile apps, TV apps, web apps, and they're using React Native to speed up their work, to ship faster, and to often like unblock themselves or jump into new technology stack. So it's not only new apps or old apps that were React Native and are now bigger React Native apps. It's often that they're native iOS or Android apps that are adopting React Native. And what we notice is that they're all pretty similar in terms of how they approach owning their tech stack, developing software. They typically want to have as much control over this tech stack, whether they're using a UI library like React or React Native or some backend technology. They usually already have some DevOps team that is handling their like internal cloud, or has AWS or Google Cloud or some Cloudflare setups, etc. So these are the enterprises that we work with. They are already established businesses, oftentimes multi-billion-dollar businesses. So they're like, it's a good business with not that great engineering culture or engineering capacity.
Or sometimes with tech debt, because they exist for like 10 years and they are just trying to live with what they inherited. Yes,
which is perfectly normal. It's a normal thing that the code we write today is going to be a little or more or less obsolete in a year, 2 or 5 or 10 years from now. 5 to 10 is like, it's pretty sure we're going to deal with legacy code, and we'll need to go through extra hoops to develop in that. So seeing like all of those different problems that we were solving in a unique way, often for each and every client of ours, we noticed that there are those similar environments that they operate with, and we also noticed that we're solving the same problems over and over again. These problems were like building a lot of custom internal tooling that they were not able to open source, and they were building that on top of React Native Community CLI. And just to give you some extra context, most of our clients are not using Expo CLI, for example. They use Expo modules, lots of libraries from that ecosystem, but oftentimes they're not able, for various reasons, better or worse, adopt this particular framework. So they work with whatever Burr-based setup React Native comes up with, and it happens to come up.
Can we mention real quick that React Native Community CLI, that's something that you worked on also?
The Community CLI is a project that was like ripped off the core of the React Native, where it was the React Native CLI back in like before 2019 or so, and the React Native CLI has actually came from a third-party library or project called RNPM, or React Native Package Manager, which was developed by Mike Grabowski, which is our CTO and co-founder. So we went from some CLI, some community line interface, which was the only like sane interface for React Native back then. It started in the open source, moved to the core, moved back to the core, and moved back to the community in form of community CLI. And now a lot of those community CLI modules, because it's a model repo of different helpers and packages, moved back to the core of React Native. So we're like swinging back to the core, making core leaner and off the core, etc., etc. And during that time in the React Native community, together with the core team, with Meta, we figured that it would be great if we had a better contract between what the core team is focusing on in terms of what is React Native at the core and what is React Native at the tooling and user experience level. And from there, the RFC for React Native frameworks came out, where the only sane framework at the time was Expo, and the alternative that users had was the community CLI, which was like not very fully fledged.
Yeah, it's not
framework.
Entirely comparable to Expo.
Yeah, so it definitely isn't. However, what's great about Expo and their transition through the last couple of years is that they, instead of going sideways to the React Native or even the community CLI, they made their tooling a lot more compatible with what's not Expo CLI, with what's the community CLI. So today you can use Expo modules, you can use Expo updates, and a lot of other like different packages helpers that they expose in a typical React Native community CLI project. So we have this landscape of large enterprises, a lot of legacy code, and most of them are using community CLI, which is not a framework. It's a very basic tooling on top of React Native, and it doesn't have a really good roadmap ahead of itself. Because now that
it's missing some key points, so that's why people are building on top of it. They have their own DevOps teams and they're trying to build their own solution, and that's what you notice, that they're sort of building the same thing in different companies.
Yes, more or less, and they fail most of the time doing so, and that's why they reach out to expert companies like Callstack to help them figure out those intricacies with the React Native tooling, which is complex because it crosses the boundaries of JavaScript, iOS tooling, Android, Windows, different TVs, some other platforms that are coming up in the future. So it's a really, really complex ecosystem, and we as the community, React Native community, we as Callstack, we just don't want React Native to be hard to use. And the only ways to use React Native at the time were either Expo, and if you can't go with Expo, you need to use this not very.
You're stuck with your own custom abstractions and utilities on top of CLI.
Łukasz, were you using Expo in your project?
No, I have flashbacks from what Michał say about my project, because it is a big project that was started years ago, and even though it had a rewrite not that long ago, it still has some like legacy patterns and legacy code base and etc. So, and especially around those like pipelines, we inherited those pipelines from previous projects. So we customized them but it's still a lot of like interconnected web of like actions and outputs and caching and dependencies. So in order in that project to figure out your own caching, it's hard, right? It's great that Michał started standardizing that, basically. So we don't have to keep up with our own custom implementation and maintain our own custom implementation. It's better to use something standard and to have some knowledge built around that in community and not like siloed in the projects themselves.
You're listening to React Universe on Air, your go-to podcast for all things cross-platform with React and React Native.
Yeah, so like Michał mentioned, you touched on a lot of stuff, and we kind of did the basics of RNEF. You were talking about caching and cloud builds. I mentioned incremental adoption. But Michał, we've done like a little intro. What would be the next thing that you would like to explain about RNEF?
Yeah, so I would like to explain the base thing actually, because we're exploring the history of the last 10 years that took us into brought us into this place. So what we've seen at our R&D department like late last year is that there is a good opportunity for a new framework, which means an actual good experience for those big enterprise, often legacy projects that the community CLI is not able to fulfill, because it's also quite, bare bones, and it's even more bare bones today because of that React Native Frameworks RFC. We wanted it to be very basic and very simple. So it's basically good for internally testing React Native, but not very good to ship your product to the users. And what we focused on is that building infrastructure. So what enterprise framework is today is like two areas. One is the CLI, which is the interface into your application, to building your application. The CLI allows you to start a dev server, open a connection to emulator or simulator or an actual device. It allows you to build your project for a particular target of your device on iOS or on Android, and it allows you to do that in like debug mode and release mode, and it also like gives you some extra toolings, and that on its own.
I want to interject real quick because I'm curious about the use case for connecting to your emulator. What's the use case that you can connect to your emulator with the tooling?
I mean, that's a basic React Native start. It's almost the same. So you have the dev server that opens up the connection to your device, and it listens to the changes. So you have the fast refresh or hot module replacement, basically. And while building this project, and even though like I say we, this is me, Szymon Rybczak, and Maciej Jastrzębski, who were initially helping me with that project, we quickly realized, and even though we were on the daily basis like maintaining the community CLI project, and it was like in the maintenance mode, we haven't done proper feature development in a long time, and we're like falling behind Expo in terms of functionality or developer experience. We realized that building a new command line interface from scratch, that developers don't even have a good experience when building their app for release mode. So imagine, or just try to remember, when you today in a community CLI project, when you want to build or run your app in the debug mode or configuration debug variant, you can do that pretty easily with run iOS or run Android commands. However, if it comes to building for release when it involves signing certificates or
then you used Fastlane.
Yeah. So what we noticed, there's no working commands in the today's CLI to do so. So what people are doing, they're like basically always running either Fastlane or running Gradle wrapper for Android manually themselves, or they run Xcode build themselves. So they essentially reverse engineer what we do in the community CLI. And this is the part of the project that is running on those pipelines that Łukasz mentioned. So the CLI is like one part of the project that connects to our like configuration system, which is meant to be independent of the interface that you're interacting with. So we hope that our system can be interfaced through CLI or through a desktop application or through a web application at some point, for example. And that's the way that allows you, that's the part that allows you as a community CLI project to adopt our like this new framework in like 10 minutes, because it's very similar in terms of the capabilities that you can do. It can do even more. Some things are not implemented either yet, or we just dropped because dropped some supporting support of some commands that were previously available in the community CLI. We haven't brought them in for various reasons. And when having that, you already will have a better experience when not only building for like locally for debug, but if you would like to produce an actual APK or AAB for Android or IPA signed builds, it will help you do that, and you will be able to achieve that with the same tooling instead of figuring out what the heck is Xcode build or what's the Gradle W thing that someone is calling in my project. So that's one thing. And another thing is the part that Łukasz started with, which is caching, like something that we called remote build cache. So essentially having a smart way to tell whether the native iOS or Android build that you've already done somewhere, either locally or on your CI, is necessary to be rebuilt once again. And what's important to realize is that in React Native projects, we're building native apps. However, like 70 to 90% of the changes that we make on a daily basis, and those enterprise bigger teams are making on a daily basis, are in the JavaScript realm. So they're not even touching the native files. And mostly when they're editing the native files is when they're like upgrading some libraries or upgrading React Native, which is not happening very often, or bumping the version of the project, which is happening like once a week or once every 2 weeks. That depends on the project. So we figured that like up to 90% of those builds on CI that are running this Xcode build, running the Gradle wrapper for 30 minutes per pipeline, are unnecessary. If there was a reliable caching, yeah.
I have an idea. So how about we count somehow the amount of computing power we save, the computing time, money, and then we add some trees counter on our website to say that we are like responsible company and we are saving the planet by reducing the need to build the native builds. Like, you just said that 9 out of 10 builds are unnecessary, and those take, like I said, 30 minutes for Android and 30 minutes for iOS. So we are saving 1 hour of pipeline compute time.
Yes, and that's one side of the coin. Another one is that once you have that compute available, like the rest of it, you're gonna use it. So if you haven't run end-to-end tests before because they were taking too long time because of the builds, now you're gonna run them, and you will likely use all the available compute that you have. So it's very tricky to make those assessments because yes, we're saving some compute, maybe saving some trees, but what we also want to do is we want to not only save time. This is the boring part. What we want you to do is to have more capabilities and more like speed as a business. So this means, we have some free compute. Let's use it in a way that allow us to ship more often, basically.
Yeah, and that's smart.
Sorry to destroy your point of view on saving trees.
No worries.
That's I really like it. It's just reality. Yeah. So we realized that if we had this smart caching, that would be nice. And what we seen and what we also did for our clients is that we were focusing on caching the build process. So for Xcode, we were optimizing the inputs, outputs so that it can have a more reliable cache when it's available. We were using Ccache, which was helping with the C++ parts because we need to build them from scratch for React Native. And React Native itself could do a lot here to, let's say, expose ready-to-use binaries instead of building it from scratch all the time. Evan Bacon has a great post on that, and Jamie Birch as well, if you follow them on Twitter.
About caching, not about RNEF.
Yes. About like more efficient build caching. And we thought, like, hey, what if we could skip the builds, entirely because they don't need to happen?
That's a bold thought in React Native world.
And it was actually inspired by, another piece of, we had this idea. We didn't know how to properly solve it. We've seen Turbo Repo doing some smart caching based on files input. We were thinking, hey, maybe we could do some kind of file hashing and figure out, essentially the one hash, like one number that would describe our state of the native project. And what we realized is that, hey, Expo already built that. There is a project from Kudo, from Expo, that I think they mostly build that for the sake of safety of over-the-air updates, and so that you can be sure that the update that you're targeting with your particular new JavaScript is compatible with the native version that is already on the user device, because there is going to be many.
Yeah, it's smart to check. Okay, so this is actually part of Expo. It's not an optional thing. It's in Expo.
Yes, at the same time, it's a standalone package. It's called at Expo/fingerprint. And at first sight, we were, hey, this maybe could work, although it only supports iOS and Android. We'll need to support more platforms in the future, but let's give it a try. And Maciej, actually, from our original team, built a proof of concept that actually worked and gave us...
With the fingerprinted caching.
Yes, with fingerprint and without patching it in any way. So we were able to use a library and wrap it in a experience that's easy to use from a GitHub Actions perspective on a GitHub Actions runner. If you have the GitHub CI, this is what we first start with. So with that, we had a system that allowed us to tell build or not build. So you can think about it as React on a server. We're on our pipelines that we give you those GitHub Actions that you can import in your workflow and just run them, every time on every pull request. And our this job that you're importing is going to figure out whether to build or not to build the project. But you can think about it, hey, it's always being built, because the output is always going to be a artifact. It's going to happen in 30 minutes or sometimes even 30 seconds. And that will happen for the development builds, and also, which is the tricky part, for release and assigned builds. So for end-to-end testing, you don't really need to sign builds. You can, sign your test application with debug key store on Android for simplicity. But if you want to test on actual devices, we will need to we needed to support this this scenario.
Yeah, in the long run, you want to have this tool work for everything. So you have to if you want people to use this tool for their development builds and for the production builds, everything needs to work. Like you said, let's stop messing around with Xcode, and let's just use the right tool.
And once we realized that this works, and we were thankfully collaborating with some of our clients in the very early stages of development of that tool, one of which was that computer project from Łukasz that he was involved with. We also, even before that, realized that once we have those builds, right? So they're already built. So why are we building locally even? We could download those builds that are compatible with our local state of the project and have this for free. So at the beginning of planning, and that was late in 2024 of this project, we thought that we're gonna build some kind of server that will synchronize, download, upload, synchronize the native artifacts, which is those APKs, AABs, and IPAs and ABPs. Between the CI and local environment. But what we realize is that, hey, we don't need that complexity, because when the developer wants to run their app on Android device, they literally type run Android. So we figured that before trying to build the project locally, let's check if there is a cache available in the GitHub project, in your GitHub action. So if the developer has access to that GitHub space, they can access that with a organization-wide token, for example, that they can get for themselves or from a org admin. They can download those, the CLI can download those builds seamlessly, under the hood for them.
For me as a developer, that's sort of a life changer in the situations where you want to check out a branch somebody else is working on, and you want to do a real quick review. You don't have to wait for your build. You don't have to set up everything locally. You download this thing from cache.
Yeah, exactly.
You're good to go.
Exactly. And the best thing is that you don't even need to build locally, and you don't need to install the native dependency tooling. For example, for iOS, before building, you'll need to install CocoaPods. This often takes few minutes in bigger projects. Yeah. And with that system, you can skip CocoaPods part altogether, and you can switch between the branch as long as the build for that branch is already available. But the second it's available, you can do that. And not only you can do that as a developer, your QA engineer can do that as well. And they can download this build for themselves, push it into their devices, and test right away, even on your PR. So this opens up those new experiences of collaboration between developers and quality engineers, which is in many companies, it's very much siloed. Developers are working, in batches on their stuff. They're aware of some bugs, not aware of the rest. And then we have the QA part, and it goes in those series like development, QA, and what we what we learned for many years in software development, that we can produce software faster and more efficient with less bugs if we have tighter feedback loops. So if we could collaborate with QA engineers that are seeing more than developers, they just have those talents for breaking our apps, which is amazing, but a bit painful for developer as well. If we can get them to collaborate, we can produce software of higher quality faster. So with those two pieces together, the CLI and the remote caching system available on your CI, and it's your CI, it's not some third-party cloud. It's like you run GitHub Actions, you can run this on GitHub Actions.
Yeah. You own it, you control it, you're in charge of it.
Yeah, if you run on Bitrise, you can run it on Bitrise. It's gonna be a bit more complicated because we haven't built a plugin for Bitrise yet, but we're working on making it universally available for anyone in a way that Turbo Repo, for example, is.
You mentioned that you haven't built the plugin yet, so that's like another small thing, that the library is modular, and you build it with like modularity in your mind, and it's made for incremental adoption.
If you're using React Native Community CLI today, or consider trying React Native in your existing iOS or Android project, chances are you'll enjoy the React Native Enterprise Framework. We built it based on years of experience maintaining Community CLI and supporting enterprises from Fortune 500, many of which already tried and adopted RNEF and enjoy 20 times faster cloud builds most of the time. If you'd like to try it, go to rnef.dev and check the quick guide for your project. Or you can book a meeting with me and our team will help you use its full potential in a week. Back to the episode.
We spend a lot of time talking about cloud builds, but I would love to touch upon working with Brownfield, because I think that's another big piece of the puzzle here. So can you walk us through a little bit? And let's start with Project A. Was it a Brownfield or was it like a pure React native app?
So our project is a Greenfield app.
Okay.
But as I recently had an episode about Brownfield, each React Native project is not really Greenfield to the core, right? Because like you always have those native, you always have that native code.
Yeah, at some point you'll end up having to check something on the native side.
And also like even if you don't like modify the native modules in any way, like you will... In my project, if I have 4 different variants of the same application, or 5, I still have a bunch of like code in the Gradle file for Android to like stitch it all together and to give it a proper package name and to give it a proper icon and etc. etc. So like you always need to have that in those kind of bigger enterprise projects.
Yeah. But like regular Brownfields, as we know, if somebody has their native app, they want to add React Native, it's sort of, you sort of have to start with some lessons, articles, reading stuff, because it's not super easy. And then there's RNEF. So what changes here?
Yeah. So what we realized over the last couple of months, actually, is that the current way of, because what we're talking about as a Brownfield is actually in integrating React Native app in like a view, for example, in a existing native iOS or Android or whatever else application. So this is what we typically mean by Brownfield. And current way of doing that is very complex, because it requires your project to change its structure, to adopt React Native dependencies that it depend on specifically. For iOS, it requires you to adopt CocoaPods, and most of the ecosystem, moved to SPM, for example, to Swift Package Manager. So iOS developers especially hate adding like extra new tooling that's redundant, which CocoaPods is for them. And what we are doing at the same time for our clients is that we've thought about a different way of doing it. And we imagined that if we package like everything around React Native, which is the whole React Native app together with the JavaScript bundle, all the frameworks inside, etc., in a single executable, in a single framework, for example, or a library file, we could import that in a native project, and that would leave us without CocoaPods, without the necessity to mess with the project structure. We could just import React Native as any other library and instantiate it as a view. So we did that for a couple of our clients, and it worked pretty great. It has some small trade-offs that we're working around on the as we go with some packages that we were able to patch, for example. But in majority of cases, this is something that works, and that we decided to incorporate into the Enterprise Framework project in the form of plugins. So React Native Enterprise Framework is a modular system. You can extend its capabilities with plugins, with platforms. You can replace bundlers, and currently we're supporting that you can use Metro or Repack, which is allowing you to use RSPack or Webpack. And we also allow you to build your own plugins. At the same time, we've built some either built-in or like ready to use, ready to grab for your plugins in our monorepo. And two of those plugins are the Brownfield plugin for iOS and for Android. That if you're using a React Native Enterprise Framework in your project, you can add those plugins, and they will expose new commands for packaging all of that React Native app that you're building with Enterprise Framework in a single XC framework for iOS, or something we call FAT AAR, a library file for Android. And then you can grab, drag and drop those frameworks into your native project, and done. You have React Native in your project now, whether it's a fully fledged application or it's some single screen or particular widget that you would like to use in some parts of your native app. And this is particularly exciting because React Native recently turned 10 years, and we're still pretty early in the adoption curve. But what we see is that more and more businesses are using React Native to ship mobile, especially mobile native apps. But also what we've seen with our other customers, there's a lot of TV enterprises that are using React Native so that they can build once, more or less, and deploy their app on 10 different TV operating systems, which is amazing for them, because with 20 people they can do what they did with 100 people a few years ago. This is the case of our client.
And if for those of you who are not lucky enough to work with TVs, there are so many operating systems. Łukasz had another podcast with two guests. It was Mike and I don't remember his name.
Chris Track.
Yes, Chris, Mike and Chris, and they were trying to actually count the OSs that they target with their apps, and I don't think they managed to actually count them at the end.
Yeah.
Because there are so many. So a tool like RNEF is definitely awesome.
So at this point, we're still adding the support for TV plugins, but that's not the point. The point is that I wanted to make is that we're early on the adoption curve of React Native, and we're approaching the space where more and more companies will likely adopt React Native. And those are going to be new projects where they will just be able to use Expo for most of the time, and that's going to be great. Or vibe code their app using Bolt or something like this. That's happening. That's going to happen.
That is happening. Yeah, I know.
And there are thousands of businesses that are today on native stacks on using like Swift UI or Swift for iOS and Jetpack Compose, and they would also like to ship some of parts of their applications to multiple platforms at the same time, or just migrate their whole projects into React Native so they could have all those benefits of web, React, web ecosystem, and ship to all those platforms with native apps.
I have a question to you. Like you painted this picture where there is Expo, and Expo is very good for new projects and for like most of the projects. And then there are enterprise clients and like more complicated custom setups that would really benefit from RNEF, or React Native Enterprise Framework. So what is your plan to position yourself, like to position this library, this framework for those people that are considering Community CLI or React Native or like whatever tool meet their needs to go with RNEF?
Yeah, so currently there are two kinds of users that we're particularly focusing on. First one is the users of Community CLI. So we want to give them a easy migration to something that will be able to soon call a official framework, hopefully. So something that has a roadmap, is actively developed, and it's doubling down on developer experience. And the other kind of user is those companies that are on native stacks and want to adopt React Native. Because today, migrating to React Native is a pain in the ass, basically. It's very hard. So we can't blame those iOS and Android engineers that they don't want to do that, for example, and that they are forced to. Because it's hard and in many cases counterproductive. At the same time, companies are deciding to adopt React Native, whether it's hard or not. And where we are with our framework, we want to make this effort as easy for you as it's physically possible. And that's why we're focusing on those two types of users. Something that's for example, Expo is not focusing on. They have, a lot broader scope of their users that they want to track and address, and this is great. And we're not targeting those users. If you can use Expo, you're starting new project, or it's like very easy migration from Community CLI. Maybe you're fine with their third-party clouds, Expo App Services. Go for it. If it makes your app building process faster, saves you money or whatever, that's a right call to do. We're there for those more complex cases, and for those that want to use React Native but don't know how because it's so hard, and they tried in the past, they tried recently. It's not very easy. So we're changing that.
It really shows how passionate you are about this framework. Like, I feel we could sit here and talk about it for, 10 more hours. I still feel that Łukasz has a question about your relationship to Expo.
Well, you mentioned Expo, and like I feel like this is an elephant in the room in like the whole topic of React Native frameworks, because Expo was the first one and is the only one. Like
so far.
Yeah. Like my question is, what does it mean to be framework? Is React Native Enterprise Framework already living up to this name, or do you still have some way to go? And like, what's the relationship between you and Expo and Meta going to look like? Like, that was my part of my previous question as well, but like more directly, can you like speak about those aspects?
Yeah, of course. So at this point, the React Native Enterprise Framework is not yet considered like a official framework, like blessed framework by the core team of React Native. But we're on our way to get there. And to get there, we need to check some particular boxes that we figured as a community in the form of the frameworks RFC that we collaborated between Callstack, Meta, Expo, and some other parties as well. So currently, what we're missing is the upgrading experience. So it's easier, although it's pretty easy at this point, minus the third-party dependencies, which
do you mean upgrading React Native versions?
Yes. So that's one thing. Another thing is navigation. The frameworks RFC says that we should have some navigation stack. For now, we're recommending our users to use whatever they used up until this point, which is likely React navigation, and we don't want to change that, for example. And I think like there is the rest. And maybe some more developer experience, like better DX around publishing the apps to the App Store, which all of those things that we're not there yet, they're on our roadmap, and we're working towards that future so we can be recognized as a framework. So, for example, we're gonna probably build some kind of either include the navigation, like React navigation, with some native bottom tabs, native stacks, etc. in our library template. We may explore file-based routing, for example, that would work with not only with Metro but also with Webpack, with RSPack. On top of that, we would like to build React Server components, because then we will be able to integrate it.
I would like to do a quick plug about Callstack, because you're mentioning React navigation that's maintained by a Callstacker. Hello, Satya.
Thank you, Satya.
You're mentioning native bottom tabs developed by Oskar Kwasiewski from Callstack as well. So there's really, it feels like you're orchestrating, you are capable of orchestrating a great tool using a bunch of open source libraries, and you have this insider, like you can contact those developers very easily since we work at the same company. So that makes it like kind of fast track a bunch of stuff probably.
Yes, and this is a great thing about having a framework, because like up to this point, as maintainers of Community CLI, we couldn't push our like recommended stacks or like tools that we use for almost any client to the default template, which is supposed to be as simple as possible in terms of maintenance efforts, because we don't want to spend too much time doing so. But having a framework, we can have like more opinionated way of what it means to develop a React Native application. So we can stack up a lot of our and third-party technology on top of that. Something that we want to explore is a different way of native modules system that would be web compatible.
Oh my God, that feels like a whole other topic. I have like a real quick question. Do you see a future?
I'm only talking about explorations. Yeah,
I know. Do you see a future where the React Native documentation, where you have the environment set up, we know there's React Native, by React Native, then there's Expo. Do you see a future where the next tab will be RNEF?
Yes, definitely. Right before React Universe Conf.
Okay, we're gonna
like this year.
Yeah, like this year. This is our target. So let's keep your fingers crossed. And yeah, coming back to your Expo being the only framework situation, I think most of the developers out there feel that this is kind of weird situation, right?
Because I do. I'm one of those developers.
Because the core team tells you, I mean, it started with React, right? React core team tells you, yeah, you should use a framework with React. And you can use Next.js, Remix, maybe something else. But there are at least two. And with React Native, there was the same idea. You should use a framework with React Native, and you can go with Expo, which is amazing. And it's the only thing you get a recommendation from the core team. So there's naturally a space. I think this was also a intention of the framework RFC to open some ways for other players to enter this framework business, let's say.
Yeah, a little bit of healthy competition is good for everybody when it's in the good spirits and we're all trying to build a better product.
We're all for that.
Yeah. We've been talking here about RNEF. We've talked about Cloud Builds, which is really Cloud Builds on your CI. It's a huge feature. That's a feature that Łukasz implemented in his project, and he saw. Let's repeat that. He saw the build times falling from 30 minutes to 3 minutes, right?
Yeah. So basically, it's expected if the builds on average take 30 minutes, you should be able to trim out that almost 30 minutes from your pipeline.
There you go. If you have a native app, there's a new approach to Brownfield apps with React Native thanks to RNEF. And this framework is built with modularity in mind, and you can incrementally adopt it step by step, piece by piece. You can read much more about it in documentation. React Native Enterprise Framework is open source. You can find it on GitHub. We'll post some links. You can slide into Michał's DMs as well. He's open to your questions. Łukasz and me as well. You can find me mostly on Blue Sky, on GitHub, because GitHub is trying to be social. So you can find me on GitHub as well. Michał, Łukasz, I think you're active on Twitter, on X, formerly known as Twitter. But Blue Sky as well. We'll add all the socials in the description of this episode. Go out and try RNEF for yourself, and follow Callstack as well. We have some nice social media presence on Twitter, X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, wherever you are.
We're everywhere.
We're everywhere.
We try to be.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Łukasz. Thank you, Ola.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. Yeah.
See you next time, hopefully, around the conference.
See ya.
Yep.
Yeah.
See ya.